Dana, would you like to ask me questions and then let me answer them, or would you like to debate me on these topics? I noticed that when you had Kamala Harris and Tim Walz, you gave them multiple choice answers to the questions that you asked, and you allowed them to answer the questions. I'm happy to be here to talk about policy, but if you're going to interrupt me every single time that I open my mouth, then why am I even doing this?
It's wild. Let's get into it.
Here with me now is Republican Vice Presidential nominee J.D. Vance, who represents Ohio in the U.S. Senate. Thank you for being here, sir. So the mayor of Springfield, Ohio, Rob Rue, said, quote, all these federal politicians that have negatively spun our city, they need to know they're hurting our city, and it was their words that did it. Before Donald Trump talked about eating dogs and cats on a debate stage, it was you, Senator, who first elevated this baseless rumor. These are your constituents. So why are you putting them at risk by continuing to spread claims about Haitian immigrants, despite officials in your state saying that there's no evidence and pleading for you to stop?
Well,
before he goes, notice how she framed the question. Why are you putting your people at risk? Why are you doing this? Why are you doing that? Just pay attention to the framing of how she frames her questions.
Dana, first of all, what's putting the residents of Springfield at risk, which was a town completely ignored by the American media until Donald Trump and I started surfacing some of these concerns, is that they can't afford housing, they can't afford health care. The schools have been overwhelmed, the hospitals have been overwhelmed, and they're overwhelmed because Kamala Harris allowed 20,000 Haitian migrants to get dropped into a small Ohio town of about 40,000 people, and it's completely overwhelmed the services. Now you ask, why have I...
Before we go on, he's completely right. He's completely right on that.
Talked about some of the things that I've been talking about. Let me just say this. My constituents have brought approximately a dozen separate concerns to me. 10 of them are verifiable and confirmable, and a couple of them I talk about because my constituents are telling me firsthand that they're seeing these things. So I have two options, Dana. I can ignore them, which is what the American media has done for years to this community, or I can actually talk about what people are telling me. And of course, many of the things that the media says are completely baseless have since been confirmed. For example, I was told, Dana, that by the American media, that it was baseless that migrants were capturing the geese from the local park pond and eating them. And yet there are 911 calls from well before this ever became a viral sensation of people complaining about that exact thing happening. So my attitude is listen to my constituents. Sometimes they're going to say things that people don't like, but they're saying things that people don't like because their town has been overwhelmed, and it's my job to try to fight for them and to protect them. Kamala Harris opened the border, and now these people are suffering. That's what I'm focused on, Dana.
Senator, I have to go through several things that you just said. First of all, the Clark County Sheriff and the Ohio Department of Natural Resources reviewed 11 months of 911 calls. They only identified 2 instances of people alleging Haitians were taking geese out of parks. They found 0 evidence to substantiate those claims.
Notice she didn't say when those came in. And again, just because they found 0 evidence doesn't mean there is no evidence. She's trying to use this appeal to authority. Well, we called the authorities and they didn't say anything or whatever. So, nothing's happening. That's what she's insinuating. She's trying to fact check him, right? But again, if these people are calling it in, they're likely calling it in for a reason.
Also, other evidence that you have talked about, even you've retweeted alleged evidence, are unsourced social media videos from a different city, apparently no connection to Haitians. And this is from a conservative activist.
Sorry, you know what else I find interesting? It's just they talk about stuff being unsourced, but think about the amount of unsourced and unverifiable things they say about Donald Trump. Think about that for a second. When it comes to Donald Trump, it doesn't have to be verifiable. They have no problem saying it, spreading it, and all of that. No problem, right? But now all of a sudden everything needs to be verifiable. And if they did kill the cat, eat it, and throw its bones away, how are you going to verify that? Think about that. How do you verify it? You're going to go through every trash can throughout the city?
Who offered a $5,000 reward for such things. And then going just backly to the schools and the hospitals and so forth being overwhelmed, nobody is disputing that the town of Springfield, Ohio needs help. But you're not just a bystander, you're the senator from Ohio. So instead of saying things that are wrong and actually causing the hospitals, the schools, the government buildings to be evacuated because of bomb threats, because of the cats and dogs thing, why not actually be constructive in helping to better integrate them into the community? Because there are a lot of employers there who say that the Haitian workers are helping fill jobs that they need desperately filled.
Dana, first of all, let me just respond to a couple of things that you said, but I want to start with something you said, which I think is frankly disgusting and is more appropriate for a Democratic propagandist than it is for an American journalist. There is nothing that I have said that has led to threats against these hospitals. These hospitals, the bomb threats and so forth, it's disgusting. The violence is disgusting. We condemn it. We condemn all violence.
Senator, this happened after you and President Trump were on the debate stage, said that cats and dogs were being eaten.
You asked a question, Dana, and I'm going to go ahead and answer it. What we have said is that this town has suffered terribly under the policies of Kamala Harris. Now, you just accused me of inciting violence against the community when all that I've done is surface the complaints of my constituents, people who are suffering because of Kamala Harris's policies. Are we not allowed to talk about these problems because some psychopaths are threatening violence? We can condemn the violence on the one hand, but also talk about the terrible consequences of Kamala Harris's open border on the other hand. Now, look.
Before he continues, he's dead on. The man is dead on. And it's so interesting because, like he said, she's more like a Democratic propagandist than an actual American journalist. And it's pitiful to watch her. Go find a clip of her talking like this to Kamala Harris. Go find a clip. You're not going to find it, likely. Go find her actually challenging Harris or Walz the way she aggressively interrupts and tries to challenge J.D. Vance.
Let me just fact check a couple of other things that you said, Dana, because it's important. You said that all of these migrants are in the country legally. They are in the country through what's called temporary protective status.
Right.
That is when Kamala Harris waved a magic amnesty wand, taking people and giving them legal status. That is not to say that they're here legally. That is a terrible indictment of her amnesty policies that have further opened the border and further caused terrible migration into this country.
You might not agree with the policy, and obviously you don't, which is totally fair and legitimate. There are policy disagreements all the time. But the fact is, it is the law because President Biden and Vice President Harris
are. But I
don't want to frankly go down this conversation about policy because
you made a point. You don't. I agree. You don't want to talk about policy.
No, what I want to talk about
instead of about the fact,
Senator,
that
it was your distraction.
Granted amnesty.
You were the one who started talking about eating dogs and cats.
Level.
You were the one who brought this
my
up. The
constituents
president said it to
60 million people. Cats, and I talked about it because you were ignoring this community. My constituents talked about it.
Have you been to Springfield?
It's my responsibility to surface their
Look at her, being petty, right? And usually the first person, remember Jesse, Juicy Smollett, whatever his name is, Jesse Smollett or something like that, who we didn't have any proof of what he was saying, and it came out to be fake, right? About them attacking him and dropping the noose around his neck and all this other stuff. They were running with it. They were talking about it. They believed him, but they didn't say, well, there's no evidence of this, right? Remember that. When it fits their narrative, they'll run with it. If it doesn't fit their narrative, they're going to criticize it and scrutinize it as much as they possibly can. And the woman is disingenuous. She's disingenuous because she's playing a petty game saying they're not illegal. He's not making the argument of whether they're illegal or legal or not. He's not making the argument of whether they're legal or not. This is the argument he's making, but she's trying to do it. And it seems like she's trying to do it so she can get a point. Like, I got you. Like,
concerns when the American media.
Have you been to Springfield?
Dana, I've been to Springfield probably 100 times in my life.
How about
I've
recently,
taken my children
since
to
you've
get
heard
ice
this?
cream at Young's Jersey Dairy.
Have you heard recently since you've gotten these calls?
Have I been in the last 4 days?
No,
I
I'm
haven't
talking
been
about
in the last 4 days, but I've
since
talked
you've
to a lot
gotten
of
these
people
calls
in
from the
Springfield,
constituents.
Dana, and they're telling me this stuff is happening. Dana, would you like to ask me questions and then let me answer them, or would you like to debate me on these topics? I noticed that when you had Kamala Harris and Tim Walz, you gave them multiple choice answers to the questions that you asked, and you allowed them to answer the questions. I'm happy to be here to talk about policy, but if you're going to interrupt me every single time that I open my mouth, then why am I even doing this? So please ask a question and I'd ask you to be polite enough to let
Yes.
me answer it.
Yes.
Boom. That's it. Notice, she has him in. She's been arguing with this man on TV. You want to talk to the guy that's running, ask him questions, and let him get the information out there to the people. But no, she's a part of the Democratic propaganda machine. So she's helping fight whatever he's saying and push Democratic narratives. And it's a shame because she tries to act like she's an unbiased whatever. And so many people try to act like journalists like this are unbiased and they're just doing the right thing. No, they're a part of the Democratic propaganda machine and they need to be called out as such. Anyway, that's all I got for today. I'll see you on the next one. I'm out.